working on a 2003 Suzuki Vitara 4-wheel drive 2.0 engine, and we got 79,000 miles. Now what we know so far is that it starts and runs okay when it's cold, and then after it warms up it bucks and jerks, and then it'll stall, and then it becomes hard to start, and it doesn't want to accelerate once it does start. Now the RPM gauge is jumping, or sometimes it doesn't move at all. Now the first thing we did when we got back was hook up the scanner and look for codes, and as you can see we had no codes. Now of course it's a little disappointing. We're wanting that scanner to tell us what the problem is, but we've got to continue on our own anyway. Now the computers in today's cars are pretty smart. Oftentimes they can help us find the problem pretty fast. But what about those times when there are no codes? No codes does not mean no problem. There's still a problem. We just can't rely on the computer to tell us what it is. So what can we rely on? It's called critical thinking, analyzing information gathered from observations and testing and using it to find the problem. So let's see how all this comes together. Now do you remember this part of the video when we're sitting there cranking the engine and looking at the RPM gauge and it's bouncing around? Now remember, at this point the only thing turning the engine is the starter, and the starter's only going to turn 100, 200 RPMs maybe, but it should be steady. It shouldn't be bouncing up to 2,000. So what's going on here? This is our first clue as to something. Now that gauge on your dash, the RPM gauge, is getting a signal for somewhere. So we're wondering, what's that signal about? Is the signal legitimate? Is that something we should look at next?
Now I've selected just certain data on here. I've got the calculated load, the map sensor, engine speed, ignition advance, mass airflow, throttle position, and injector pulse width. Now what I want you to do is watch these numbers close over here. We've got an engine speed. Now we're sitting here with our key on, so our engine's not running. We have no RPM. Therefore we have no injector pulse width. Now we're going to just step on the gas now with the key off. Our key's on, but the engine not starting. You can see the TPS is going to go all the way up. So the computer is seeing the TP voltage. So let's watch this when we crank. Watch your engine speed, which is your RPM, and your injector pulse width. Now you could hear it cranking, so the crankshaft's turning. But we're looking here at RPM, and it's not seeing it. So obviously the PCM doesn't know when to fire the plugs and injectors. We can see the injectors aren't firing because we have no pulse width. Now we're going to do this a few times and see if we can get it to hit. And what we're noticing here is your RPM is going to jump up. Now remember, the starter is turning this thing. Starter's only going to turn it maybe 100, 200, and at the most 300 RPMs, but not thousands.
The RPM is the engine turning over, and the crank sensor should be reporting that. We can hear that the engine is turning over, but the RPM is either reporting 0 or something way out of line in the thousands.
Okay, sometimes when we crank it, we get lucky and it actually starts. So we've actually started this time. The engine's running. Look at our RPM. We've got 900 and some. We've got 4.5, 4.6 on an injector pulse width. But it's running. So now what we're going to do is sit here and try and accelerate it, and then watch your numbers. Now what we're doing there, we're steady on the throttle. We're not pumping this engine. We're just accelerating and holding the throttle steady. But look at the RPM. It's jumping around. We're down below, real low, and then we go up into the thousands.
Man, something's terrible.
So you can see we're cranking and our numbers are jumping all over the place. So obviously the PCM has no idea where the cam timing is, and the camera, remember, is controlling the timing. Now what this is telling me, when I'm looking at this, I'm not seeing any RPM, but I can hear it cranking, and we know it's cranking, and I'm not seeing any injector pulse width. Most of the time when I do see them, that data is not logical. So I'm figuring the signal going to the ECM telling it when to fire everything is bad. Remember, this is just digital data and it is updated, it's not live. So now we need to go to the sensor with the lab scope and look at live data.
If the RPM reading comes from the crank sensor, we should look at that first, right? Well, perhaps. But remember critical thinking? The crank sensor is mounted on the back of the engine underneath the transmission bell housing, and it's pretty hard to get to. The cam sensor is mounted right on top, and it's very easy to get to. And both sensors are inputs for the RPM. So let's take a look at the easy one first. The cam sensor is number 7 on the diagram, and it's located in the back of the engine back by the firewall, but it's easy to get to. The ECM uses the cam sensor for misfire identification as well as for fuel and timing adjustments. And the ECU applies a 5 volts on the cam signal wire when the conductive sprocket tooth passes through the sensor, and the voltage drops to approximately 0 volts as it passes again the second time. So what we have is a square wave on and off. Now in the 3-pin connector, you're going to have pin number 1 as battery voltage, pin number 3 is going to be ground, so we should have 0 volts, and on the cam sensor wire, which is number 2, should be our square wave. Now we're looking at the yellow-blue wire is the one we want to look at.
Now this is our cam sensor, which we're going to back probe, but you can't see this very well with this on it for the video, so I'm just going to cut that back. Peel that back, and now you can see our wires. As we looked at the diagram, we got a 3-wire sensor. The middle one is the 5-volt sensor wire. So we're actually going to use our T-pin and back probe that one. So now we're going to look at the signal wire on the scope. Now I back probed and saved all my waveforms, and I'm going to play them back as a movie. That way I got a little bit more control of them. And now we're going to turn it on. This is during cranking. It's cranking, but it's not starting. Let's go back and look at this just a little bit more detail. So when I scroll back, this is where we've got our 5-volt reference, and the first thing that happens is when we begin to crank, you can see we got a very disturbed signal. We're going to 5 volts back down to 0 volts, or very close to 0, but it is not clean. It needs to be a clean, crisp, on and off signal. Should be like this more for the whole time, but all of this distortion over here is part of our problem.
Now doesn't this look familiar? If you actually remember this part of the video where we're sitting there looking at the RPM gauge and it was bouncing around, well, look at the pattern on this scope. It's bouncing around. So the needle X is actually mimicking the RPM gauge.
Now in this waveform, you can see we're reading 0 volts, and we're going to crank the engine. It has a little hard time starting, but then once it starts, then you can see the signal begin to calm down. So it's a little bit erratic, and then it starts and revs up because we've been cranking on it. Now we raise the idle down a little bit, and we're sitting there and idling. If I stop this, now you can see that we've got our signal. Now before we can dim our cam sensor down here, we want to ensure that we got good powers and grounds. Now I'm going to back probe my power wire. If it's good, you should see a red light, you should hear the beep, and read 12 volts on the power probe. All 3 of them mean we got a good power. So now we're going to go to the other wire, which is our ground. Should be the same thing, except our light should be green, and we should read 0 volts. 0 volts, green light, and a beep. Now, if we didn't read 0 volts, or if the light was on but it wasn't beeping, that would mean we don't have a good ground. So as you can see, our cam sensor has a good power and has a good ground, but the signal wire is sending a very distorted signal whenever we're cranking or even when you're running, and sometimes when we're just wiggling the sensor. We now have evidence that the cam sensor is bad. Have we found our problem? Are we done? Do we simply replace the cam sensor now? Remember critical thinking. What would you do next and why? Submit your comments now.